concerned to link theory to action, and he deliberately ignored all aspects of his subject that were not of immediate relevance to the conduct of the kind of war with which he himself was familiar. "The conduct of war," he wrote, "has nothing to do with making guns and powder out of coal, sulphur, saltpetre, copper, and tin. Its given quantities are weapons that are ready for use and their effectiveness. Strategy uses maps without worrying about trigonometrical surveys. It does not inquire how a country should be organized and a people trained and ruled in order to produce the best military results. It takes these matters as it finds them in the European community of nations." To that extent, therefore, Clausewitz deliberately sacrificed universality to pragmatism and simplicity. It may, however, be doubted whether he was conscious of quite how much he was sacrificing. It is easy enough after 2 world wars to criticize a theory of war that excluded all consideration of the economic base that makes the fighting of war possible at all, but to do this is not just to evoke the wisdom of hindsight. It demanded a very narrow view of the nature of war to study the Napoleonic period so intensively, as did Clausewitz, without taking into account the part played in Napoleon's strategy, and perhaps in his downfall, by the continental system. His attempt to use economic as well as military instruments to consolidate and extend his conquests. Clausewitz's ignorance of the whole maritime dimension of warfare is striking, but not surprising. The oceans lay beyond his cultural horizons. It is more curious that a Prussian specialist on military questions, whose country had been established as a major military power as much through skill in economic management as by military victories, should virtually ignore a dimension of military affairs that had occupied the forefront of the mind of every Prussian soldier, statesman, and bourgeois since the days of Frederick William I. Perhaps this one-sidedness reflected the limitations of Clausewitz's own personality and interests. More probably, it was the impact of the great Napoleonic campaigns that shaped his career and dominated his thinking, campaigns whose dramatic course and cataclysmic results overshadowed the humdrum concerns of military budgeting and administration that had so obsessed the old Prussian army. When it came to the point, it was the successful conduct of operations that mattered, and the events of Clausewitz's lifetime had made it clear that it was to this, and not to the deeper questions relating to military financing, budgeting, procurement, and administration, that attention had most urgently to be given. Clausewitz's ignoring of the economic dimension of war was thus, at least in part, deliberate. His ignoring of another dimension, the technological, was unconscious and more easily understandable. Like most of his intelligent contemporaries, he realized very well that he had been born into a revolutionary era likely to transform, for better or worse, the entire political structure of European society. But no more than anyone else could he appreciate that he was living on the eve of a technological transformation of yet vaster scope. The conduct of war is determined above all by 2 factors: the nature of the weapons available and the modes of transportation. The first had remained stable for 100 years, the second for 1,000. In Clausewitz's day, as in Caesar's, logistics were determined by the speed and endurance of marching men and of draft animals. Tactics were determined, as they had been in the age of Marlborough, by firearms whose effective range was 50 yards and cannon with a range of 300. And although there had been significant incremental developments during the past century, developments whose significance Clausewitz analyzes most interestingly in the course of On War, there was no reason to expect the transformation, both in transportation and in armaments, that began in the decade following Clausewitz's death in 1831, with the development of railways and the introduction of breech-loading rifled firearms. Much of On War is therefore of interest only to